what we've got are, in effect, two cylinders, one in front of the other. And we can see the top ellipse of the back cylinder, and we can see the top ellipse of the front cylinder. Excuse how rudimentary these sketches are. I'm not very good with this stylus. We've got a spoon coming out of there. So primarily we have got that. We've got two cylinders on a plain background. Now the light is coming, if we're looking at this, the light's coming over my right shoulder. So so the light is coming down there. So that is filling in the inside of these two hollow tube cylinders. It's allowing a shadow to form on that side of the cylinder and on that side of the cylinder. Okay. And it's also casting a shadow on the surface down there. So, in its most rudimentary form, that's the drawing that we're going to kick off with. That's basically our composition. Okay, let's get out of here. Right, so if I get rid of that, I'll come in a little bit closer. I'm using quite a chunky pencil because I found that if I just use my favorite propelling pencils, you can't really see what I'm doing. They're it's a little bit fine. So I'm going a little bit heavier than I normally would do with this old beast of a pencil. I don't know what it is. It's nothing special. It hasn't even got a name. It's just one of those company pencils. But you know, a pencil's a pencil. So let's start off by I'm going to go across here and do a nice spread. So I'm going to start off with the top of that cylinder, the bottom of that cylinder. Oh, and a quick note about ellipses. When you draw an ellipse, a lot of people draw an ellipse like this. An ellipse, when I say an ellipse, I'm talking about, you know, the top and the bottom here. A lot of people tend to put little sharp corners on like that, which is wrong. An ellipse is a squashed circle. So it's like, it always looks like that. Quick note on ellipses. So ellipse at the top, ellipse at the bottom, a bloated cylinder, another ellipse there, another bloated cylinder there. And of course the ellipses are on the bottom as well. You just can't see them at the back. Okay. Those look approximately correct. So now that I've got those in there, I can start to refine the edges. And I'll say, okay, I'm happy with the placement of those two cylinders there. So let's start to put this in and let's get that spout in. I'm noticing that the belly of this tube doesn't come out any further than the spout, so I'm just allowing it to travel down there. It sits on a little upstand like that. You know, sometimes we spend a bit of time getting a nice drawing down. Sometimes we just rough in an outline and hurl some paint at it, but it's quite nice to try and get your proportions right. And this is the time to do it. It's quite nice to not look back at the end of your painting and think, why didn't I just take a minute to step back and realize that that was in the wrong place? And this is the time to do that. You know, you've got, are those in the right place? No, that base is too far over there for that top. So I can correct that. I'm going to maybe shift that base across a little bit. And I'm going to allow that to come down there a little bit more. That's better. Right, let's quickly get this. But again, this is only a sketch, so we're not going to pour over it. This is just a sketch to understand what we're looking at. And I also want to say, obviously, because of the limitations of this class, I have to print off what I see and what I'm actually looking at in real life, but you can't be drawing from life. So let's just use this as a learning curve, and let's just use this as a lesson. But when you're done, get out there and draw from life, because this makes a world of difference. Right, now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to get down the thickness of that vase. So as we said, the light's coming from the right, and it means that inside here, it's kind of shaded. But I'm using that to try and define the thickness of the pottery as well. See what I'm doing? Let's show you that again. So again, inside this jug is in shade, but I'm starting in from the edge, and that tells us that that jug's got a thickness. It also tells us that the light's coming from over there, and inside that jug is in shade. Similarly, the outside edge of the jug's in shade as well. So I'm just making a visual note of that. Okay, now that's probably enough to get cracking with. That's given me enough scaffolding to be able to start painting. And of course, this shadow down here. So all right, I'm happy with that. This handle, of course, is also in shadow. Paint. Just thought I'd grab my on-the-go kit, which is this little set of paints, and my water brush. So can we see everything we need to see there? Yeah, maybe if I put that there. It's tricky to get everything in. There we go. So, right now, this is quite a neutral picture. Apart from the blue lines, apart from the blue stripes, it's all pretty much one color. It's this kind of neutral beige all the way around. So that's the color we're going to try and hit, and it's a pretty nondescript color. So I'm going to try and make a puddle of it to start off with, and I'm going in with a little bit of yellow. Can you see that? Now, obviously, that's too yellow. Too bright, it's too vivid. So I'm going to cool it down with a little bit of, it's called English red, I think, but I'd be tempted to call it brown. Still too hot and gingery, so I need to cool that down. So in order to do that, I'll go and look for a complementary colour to that, which is over this side, which is in the green area. So if I add a bit of green to that, that's going to cool it right down. Now, I know it looks a bit murky, but I'm going to use that diluted to try and get the neutral tone of the pottery in first. So what I'm doing is I'm coming in and I'm putting in the shadow area on both these ceramics. So it's on the left, on the outside, where the light falls away, softening it down with clean water like we've learned to do over the past few weeks. And then also on the inside. Coming in from the dark side and then softening it again with clean water. And look at that, it immediately starts to give it a bit of depth, doesn't it? It starts to, if not depth, three-dimensionality it immediately says, in here is in shadow, and out here is highlight. I can accentuate that where it gets even dark. Look, round the back here, it's incredibly dark. Okay. That's an interesting little spot as well. That there, just where that overlaps the background, that tells us a lot about where things are. Because that's overlapping, that immediately tells you that these are objects in a three-dimensional space. Right. I'm going to leave that because I want to get that dry before I start to put in some blue stripes. So while that's drying, actually, what would be nice to do is get a few more, get a bit of tone in there. So you see what I've done now? Just added a little bit of green, and I've added a little bit of green to there, just to try and make it less monochrome. Okay. Oh, and also just get that lip around the bottom. That's quite an important visual sign. Oh, I forgot the spoon. Which is quite nice. What's that? Throws a little shadow, which again tells us it's objects in space. Now, I'm going to put in the background, and then I'm going to come back and I'm do the blue lines. But I want this to dry, because if I put these blue lines on top of this wet paint, then it'd blur, it'd bleed. So what you can do, a lighter here. And if you've got areas of damp that you really want to dry off, you can give it a quick blast with a lighter. I mean, I don't expect you to have a lighter on your drawing desk, but it's just a little tip. If you're working and you want to do something dry on top of something that is too wet, this will seal off moisture. Right, that's good. I'm going to leave that. Let's work on this background. This background is a little more gingery than the tone that I've put in the pot. So I'm going to put a bit of brown in here. I'm going to maybe warm it up with a little bit of red. I'm going to make plenty, because I'm going to flood the whole background with one tone. And the reason I'm doing that is because around here, you know, we talk about negative shapes. If I don't put a colour in there, all I've got is that line to tell you that that's where the edge of the jug is. I want more than a line. I want a change in tone. So I'm going to mix up a curious collection, and I'm going to start to lock in. And now you see, as soon as I come up to that edge there, it shows you where the edge of the jug is. And in order to show that thickness of ceramic there, I need to do that. And then suddenly you can see how thick that jug is. I'm using a crazy collection of colours because it's a painting and I can. A little bit of blue maybe, just to add a little bit of interest. Squeezing as I go. These things are great for covering distances. Now, as I come down here, I can see here, look, there's shadow around the base of this jug where the light is struggling to reach. And also there's wood grain in here. So I'm tempted to just try and indicate that somehow with scratches or pencil marks. I might come back to that later, but I'm not going to do it now because I want to keep all these, this moving. So if I let this dry, as soon as this paint dries, that's going to leave a hard edge. And I don't want to do that. I want to keep these edges soft. Again, leaving that gap there, just to show everybody that there is thickness to that jug, and also here. You can see where, because I've come and I've wet it and caught it before it's dried, it means that it's not going to leave a hard edge, so it's all quite smooth. This is a good opportunity to get in some cast shadow. So actually, I've run out of colour there, which is a schoolboy error. Should have had more, made more. So while that's still wet, let's get some shadow in here. And also, around the bottom of this edge here, and also in here. It's dark, so there's not a lot of colour getting in there. Not a lot of light, sorry. I can also see I need to darken off. For me, there's not enough modelling in these ceramics. I'd like to see it darker in here. I'd like to see it darker down there. But I'm not going to do that right now because I want to get these blue lines in as we're running out of time. Now I can always, when the lines are dry, I can always glaze over to create more three-dimensionality in the jugs, which I probably will do. But in the meantime, let's get the blue stripy lines in because they're going to really make this painting pink. So what kind of a blue is that? It's probably a Prussian blue. You've got two blues in every paint set. You've got an ultramarine blue, which is that one, the warm blue, and you'll have a Prussian blue, which is this one. I don't know if that's going to be obvious. The difference between the two is going to be very obvious on this camera. But I'm making a nice little puddle of Prussian blue, which is going to be enough paint for me to put 3 stripes there and 3 stripes there. I'm going to do them quickly. I'm going to try and do them confidently. So before I do, let's have a look. They follow, obviously they follow the contour of the jugs. And look, they swing round just like, they're basically ellipses. They are the face, the outer edge of an ellipse. So I'm drawing 3 ellipses. Okay, and I'm going to do them quickly. I'm going to do them without. Oh, well, it'd be nice to try and leave that highlight as well. So maybe leave a highlight there. I might have to come back and. Now you see, because I dried that off with the lighter, that edge stayed crisp. If this was still wet, that'd be starting to bleed out. So that's why I dried that off. Coming around the corner like so. Just one stroke. Try and keep it confident. Try and keep them approximately the same size. Haven't really succeeded in doing, but it doesn't really matter. It's a painting, not a photograph. This here really swings around like so. Okay. So nice, nice two colours to sit together, the blue and the kind of ochre there, like that. It's rather nice. Okay. Now, as I was saying, I'd like to develop the three-dimensionality of the jugs a little bit more, but in doing so, I'm going to jeopardise the integrity of those blue stripes, because if I start painting on top of these while they're still wet, they're gonna blur. Just looking at these, I'm just going to put a little bit of variety in them, because I can see, I don't know if you can see, kind of little reflections. Because it's a glazed surface, there are light areas and there are dark areas in the blue. You don't notice it so much on the cream, but in the blue, there's differences in tone. So just glazing over the top like that adds a little bit of depth. It makes them look shiny. It's just little observations like that that'll bring your pictures to life. Right, I'm going to dive in and I'm going to try and add a little bit more three-dimensionality. So let's have a look. Look at the way that goes around there. Look at the way that hand, I mean, it's not ideal here because I'm down the spine of my book. But I can come with this, let's put a bit more colour in there. To me, that's a little bit brown, so I'm gonna cool that down with some green to create shadow. So let's look for where the deep shadows are. There's deep shadow in here. There's deep shadow around this edge here. It's very dark around there and in here. That edge is a little bit sharp for me, so I'm just going to go in with a wet brush and soften it off. You see, and that edge there, it's too sharp. In with a little damp brush and soften that off as well. Some interesting things going on here as well. Just little. Bit green that. Let's get it warmed up a bit. That's misleading. That entire foot that this is sitting on is white, which it shouldn't be. So let's get some tone in there. A bit too much there, so let's just lift that with a thirsty brush. And here as well, that shouldn't be white. That is shadow down there. That's better. This blue's dried off, so I can start